We're talking about pasture pork. I'm Tony Nye from the Clinton County Extension Office with Ohio State University. In this segment, we want to talk about swine housing types in a pasture pork situation. First of all, let's qualify. If we raise pigs indoors, where they're in a barn all the time, we certainly improve feed efficiency and we reduce labor costs. When we're outdoors in a pasture situation like we have been talking about, we lower our capital costs. We are perceived as being welfare friendly or more welfare friendly. And in between, whether we use an indoor-outdoor situation, we need to keep in mind that those in-between housing types of situations are bedded systems, eco-shelters, and hoop structures. And we'll look at a few pictures of those as we go on with this discussion. Shelters do not have to be fancy or expensive, but they must be functional. Our pastures, again, do not have to be fancy, but they need to be functional. So in this picture here with this sow and her babies, you see a hut there. We can enclose that hut during the first couple days after she has had her baby pigs, so the pigs know where home is. They don't get outside the hut or they stay close to the sow, and it just helps the whole learning curve for those baby pigs with mom. Here's a picture of many different styles, shapes, and sizes of structures that we can utilize in a pasture pork or sometimes a hybrid situation. Many of the smaller huts we can either build, there are plans out there, we can buy the lumber and build them ourselves, or like the Pig Saver, which is a plastic unit, or that orange unit is a commercially available unit through a company that we can purchase. The big dome building, that is a hoop structure or an eco shelter as we call it, and these are deep bedded generally. These were actually developed in Manitoba, Canada, and they would house pigs as little as 40 pounds through the coldest months of the year during the winter. They are deep bedded for a reason. The pigs can bury themselves underneath the straw and the bedding, and they can capture body heat from each other, and they can protect themselves from the extreme temperatures. The structure itself protects them from snow and rain and wind. When we think about our housing types, again, we talked, it doesn't always have to be pretty, just effective. And as we look in these different paddocks, we are using a small domed structure called a porta hut. And again, when we're farrowing in these situations and moms are going to them to have their baby pigs, we want to make sure that we provide structures that we can build a little fence around to keep the piglets close to mom, at least for the first few days to up to a week. And then we can open those up, and moms and the baby pigs have access to get out, move around, forage, as well as get to the feed and water supplies without having to maybe cater to each sow individually and her baby pigs. Weaning through finishing, there are all types of ways of doing it. The conventional style is in an enclosed building, usually with a slatted floor with a pit where the manure and water and waste falls through. We pump that out and we utilize it for crop nutrients in many cases. In a pasture pork situation, sometimes during the winter months, our paddocks, as you see in the top right corner there, don't have a lot of forages. And so we may have to accommodate our structures and our facilities for those winter months that don't always have great forage or pasture out there. So we need to think about the shelters that we provide and the housing to accommodate that kind of environment. In the summer then, we have the lush growth with lots of grass and forages for those animals to utilize, as well as the housing structures. There's lots of different buildings and styles as we've talked, whether we use a confinement barn or an old pole barn or a hoop structure or eco shelter, or we use pasture. We still need to keep in mind, animals must be cared for, they must have adequate feed and water, and they must have access so that that feed is clean, that water is fresh, and it's available all the time. We can finish pigs outside. Here's a picture from many years ago from the south where they're finishing pigs on greens. So they are supplementing these pigs in a pasture situation with excess greens that may be from other fields. Again, utilizing what we have. They are very advantageous to what they can eat. They like plants, twigs, roots, insects, other animals, and of course our grains and commercial feeds. So they are very adaptable to different types of feed stuffs. Besides our swine housing types and our paddock setup and those types of situations, we need to keep in mind too, our genetics must fit our operation, our management, our goals and objectives. So genetics are as important as feed. They interact with feed to impact eatability. So, do we raise heritage breeds? Do we raise more normal breeds, meaning more readily available to us? Heritage breeds can sometimes be difficult to locate. They can sometimes be more expensive. But at the end of the day, we need genetics that provide an efficient end product that our consumers enjoy and fulfill their expectations for an eating experience, and that we can provide enough volume of production to meet our needs for our market side of things. So again, genetics are very, very important in that whole scheme of pasture pork. Fencing is another important aspect to any pasture situation with any livestock species, and with hogs that is very important. We can use woven wire, which is 32 to 36 inches high. We may use it with a barbed wire on the ground or with electric, and this is for the purpose that pigs like to root, and we want to protect the fence and the perimeter of the pastures. So we either use barb or electric to dismay them from rooting around the edges of the pastures and fields. Hog panels can be utilized. They generally come in 16-foot segments. They can be very costly in building a perimeter fence for pasture, but they can be used in many cases for that small fencing around that farrowing box to keep mom and the baby pigs close to the shelter for the first few days. Pigs are very trainable to electric, so we can use 1 to 3 strands of electric fence. It's very functional, and pigs are very easily trained. We can maintain that with a charger. We just need to keep in mind, we need to keep grass mowed underneath the electric strands, or they will ground out and become ineffective. We need to keep any limbs or dirt, so we need to maintain those kinds of things when we talk about electric fence. The one thing I do want to tell you about electric fence is because pigs are so well trained, we need to make sure that we have an ability to get into our fields and paddocks to effectively load them when it's time to remove them or move them from one field to the next. Electric fence, we can use the 1/2-inch tape as in this picture. This is a multi-species fencing tape that can be utilized. Again, very effective, a little bit more expensive than other types of electric fencing materials. We may use electric fence on the interior to separate and make paddocks, differentiate from the permanent fence. Pigs remember electric gates, so we want to make sure that we, again, when we're loading pigs, that we get into the paddocks to load those animals, or we have a specific area that we gather those animals before we load them onto a trailer or whatever we're going to use to move them. When we think about fencing and fencing properly, we need to make sure we avoid mud. Do not place feeders or drinkers close to that gate. We want to put those somewhere else so that it doesn't get all tracked up and muddied up. We want to make sure that when we're removing pigs from paddocks and fields, that we have that gate available for a very efficient and safe loading and moving experience for the animals as well as us humans. When we think about other things with facilities, we need to remember facilities are required to protect the animals from the elements. It determines our fixed costs. It can sometimes determine how much labor we need. We also need to consider sometimes environmental regulations, so what kind of facilities can I use and can I use? And then the other thing about a pasture pork situation that we also need to keep in mind, it can be very nostalgic and very welfare looking to someone who drives by, but our neighbors may also look at it as a nuisance because pigs are outside, pigs smell. So we need to keep our production systems, our pastures, in good working order so it looks good to our neighbors. Also, facilities will determine the direction of the operation. In other words, how many animals can I grow? Can I use sows and raise litters? Or do I need to buy young pigs and just feed them at different times of the year to accommodate my meat needs or marketing needs for my customers or my family? When we think about pasture pork, again, it can be a great experience. We need to make sure that when we're talking about animal well-being, that we provide adequate shelters that are in good working order. When it comes to having baby pigs, we can sometimes move them into another facility and actually farrow them, have their babies in what we call a farrowing crate. We can either buy commercially constructed units or we can build them out of lumber. The one thing about the top picture, that is an old farrowing crate. We can wash that and disinfect that very well. When we farrow in a wooden handmade structure that we can build, we sometimes need to replace those more regularly because the lumber will and can still maintain disease and other bad things from a bacterial virus and things like that because they get pitted, they start getting worn out, and we can't clean and disinfect properly. When we think about our facilities as well, we need to think about during the summer months or the rainy months when mom or that sow is going to have baby pigs. That shelter that we provide to them may be too hot during the day. So are they going to try and find a cool place like this mud puddle and lay down and try and have their baby pigs in that situation? That may be comfortable for the sow, but it may be detrimental to the baby pigs. So again, walking your pastures, thinking about how you're laying out your system and understanding the well-being of the animal as well as their natural characteristics and instincts to survive. Shaded areas can also provide great facilities for our pigs out on pastures. They don't always have to be structures. They can be shade structures that have a shade material strapped over the top of them. They may actually be a tree area that provides natural shade with the leaves on the trees. We need to keep in mind when we're looking at our paddocks and our pastures that we provide adequate space so that our pastures and forages are maintained. We don't want a field of dirt and mud. We want a field that's green and growing. Again, when we're talking about pasture pork production, keep in mind, have a plan. Do your research and homework. Have adequate finances to do it. Have plenty of help. Have a market strategy, both while we're in production and an exit strategy. And then remember, if we keep animals healthy, we keep good green pastures, we keep happy neighbors, we can have a lot of fun, we can still make money or provide food for our families and other families that we sell to, and our pasture pork operation can be a great success. For further information, my contact information is here. Please feel welcome to contact me either by email or by phone. I'm always available. Thank you again.